Okay, everybody, welcome to OneShul here. Thanks so much for everybody for coming and joining me here tonight. Tonight we're going to be doing some Torah study together, and I'll be here every Monday night at this time for the conceivable future. So, ta-da, here I am. Tonight we'll be studying the Torah Parsha Vayishlach, which is Genesis chapter 32, verse 4, through chapter 36, verse 43. Now, before we start, I always customarily like to say a blessing before we start, so if you want to say this blessing along with me, it's in the Ahava Rabbah OneShul Community Siddur. It's the blessing for studying Torah. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech ha'olam asher kadishanu b'mitzvotav va'asot v'divrei Torah. Okay, let's get this good stuff underway, shall we? Okay. Now, this week's Torah portion opens with our ancestral father, the patriarch Jacob, having just recently departed from Laban in Haran. And we all know what a really crappy boss Laban was, how he tried, to rip him off so many times and everything. Well, that's finally handled, that's finally taken care of. He's free from Laban, departed from Haran, and now he's on his way to the area of Seir to meet with his estranged older brother Esau. Now, we all remember what Jacob did to Esau. This is the brother whom Jacob twice tricked in their younger days, snatching by trickery both Esau's birthright that was due to him, since Esau was the firstborn son, and then later he snatched Esau's blessing from him when he tricked Isaac into thinking that he was Esau and, giving the blessing to him instead. So, needless to say, Jacob is very, very, very anxious and nervous about this meeting. So, what he does is he's afraid that, Esau is still going to be angry with him. He's still going to bear a grudge against him. And even though Jacob had, amassed a lot of wealth, a lot of fortune, he had many flocks, he had great material possessions, he was a very rich man. He has 2 wives, and at this point he has, 11 children. He's like 10 or 11 sons and 1 daughter with his 2 wives. He has tons of flocks that he procured. He has maid servants. He has manservants. He has slaves. And he has people working for him and everything. But still, his entourage is very, very small. To be easily attacked and easily taken over by anybody. And he's afraid that in coming to Esau and being reunited with Esau, that he's afraid that'll exactly happen because, he knows he's taken from Esau, granted, what he took from Esau was not rightfully his, but it was given him by God because God chose Jacob over Esau. But, it's understandable to think that, there's a possibility that Esau still might be pretty peeved about this. So what Jacob does is he divides his family, his flocks, all of his slaves, all of his servants, and all of his material possessions into 2 camps. In the preparation for if Esau should attack him, then at least one of those camps will be able to flee and escape successfully. And with this, that would ensure the continuance of Jacob's house. We have to see Jacob then praying to God. And in this prayer, kind of reminding God, Jacob quotes all the promises that God has made to him. It's these promises that Jacob now sees Esau as a possible threat to. In his prayer, Jacob also expresses his humility and his gratitude to God for all the previous favors and the previous kindnesses that God has shown to Jacob. And then ultimately, he appeals to God's kindness and God's mercy and concludes by asking God for deliverance from his enemies. And in this case, he's seeing his possible enemy as his, estranged brother Esau. So, what our father Jacob does is, first off, he sends ambassadors out ahead of him from his entourage, and they're bearing numerous gifts for Esau. And this is in the hope that if, when it comes to Esau, if Esau is still angry at him, it's kind of in the hope that, kind of like he's trying to maybe buy his forgiveness, it's the hope that, that all these gifts that he's giving him, that they will appease Esau and maybe lend him to deal with Jacob kindly instead of, if he's still angry at him, maybe that'll, subdue his anger and it'll be all good. Well, the messengers, the ambassadors they sent out, they returned to Jacob and informing him of the news that Esau had 400 men with him, which again was the reasoning, behind Jacob dividing all that he had into two camps. Now, in the Torah, it makes a point to mention that Esau had 400 men with him. Now, does anybody have any idea, any thoughts as to why would the Torah make a point to, expressly mention that Esau had 400 men with him? Anybody have any thoughts to that? Why would it mention that Esau had 400 men with him? Anybody want to chime in? No? Nobody yet? Okay, well, basically the idea behind it, the mention of 400 men that Esau had with him, it's meant to underscore how even with all the wealth and prosperity that Jacob had amassed, in terms of the size of his camp, he was still greatly outnumbered and really still rather smallish. Which, if we really think about it, that talks to us today, even nowadays, like several thousand years after the scripture was written, because we can kind of view it as a metaphor for Israel, the state of Israel, Eretz Israel, being as small as it is and surrounded by larger nations all around it. And we can also sort of see this as a metaphor for, the Jewish people, the population of Jewish people, all of us, worldwide, around the world today. We're still way smaller than most nations, both in physical size and in population. And to me, I get the idea that it serves to demonstrate, two ideas. Okay? Number one, yeah, we're small. We're pretty small. We're nowhere near the largest. And the first idea that I personally get from it is that it underscores the idea that we need God. We need God in everything we do and in every aspect of our life. And that we need Hashem not just as our creator. Thank you, Tracy. Tracy says that we are number 6 on the list of top world religions. So that means that there's, just population-wise, there's 5 that are bigger than us. So if they would all, if one of them would want to take a strike at us, or God forbid, all the other 5 want to take a strike at us, we need God. We need Him not just as our creator, as our grantor of life, and as our sustainer, but also we need God as a shield. We need Him to protect us. Symbol of our faith, the Star of David, is also referred to as, well, in Hebrew, it's Magen David, which means shield of David, and that's in a way what we can sort of see God as. We need God to be our shield. Now, the second thought that I get from this, mentioning the size and the numbers and everything, is that it goes to show, it gives us an insight a little bit into the rationale and thought process and into the very mind of God. Because, God selected not the largest or the mightiest of the nations on earth to be His chosen people. At the time when God selected Israel, we were like, without a doubt, the smallest. In fact, we were the slaves to the mightiest nation on earth at the time, and that was the Egyptians. People could say, well, why would God choose, the smallest, weakest, instead of choosing, the mightiest, the big God? Well, we'll look at it this way. Okay, at the time, that was the Egyptians. Okay, they were the mightiest in the world, the most powerful. They had the most population, the most land and everything, the most territory. They were doing pretty well on their own. Okay, so if God chose them, number one, it would look like, oh, well, God's just jumping on the bandwagon. Of course He's going to select the most powerful nation in the world. It's like, it's the dead ringer pick, okay? But God chose, the weakest and the smallest. If God had chosen the strongest, and the strongest still continues to go on, being mighty, being prosperous, having victories in battle and everything, and it doesn't really lend much credibility to having God on your side if, you're doing all that anyways, So God basically, He selects the smallest and the weakest nation, which was the slave of the mightiest, and that small, weakest nation, through God, overthrew and broke away from the mightiest. And it was done all the way. This lets us into the mind of God. He knows what He's doing. This shows that He chose the smallest, weakest nation, which was us at the time, to more effectively and mightily display His glory and to show just how awesome He is and what He's capable of. The slave overthrows the master and eventually has his foot on the master's throat. Okay? It takes a pretty powerful being to be able to empower a small nation of slaves, which was pretty much nomadic shepherds and sheepherders and roaming people, to be able to do that. So, getting back to our Torah portion here. So now we move on. Later in that same night, Jacob arose and he takes his family across the stream at Shabbat. Okay, and here's where things get interesting. It's we sort of get the play-by-play of the first ever biblically documented wrestling match. Okay, upon crossing the stream, Jacob, sent his family and all of his possessions ahead. He waits behind and finds himself alone after crossing the stream. And eventually comes to the point where he ends up wrestling with a man there. So literally until the break of dawn. And when the man who was wrestling, when he saw, I lost my place here. Yeah, when the man that he was wrestling saw that Jacob had wrestled him for so long, yet he had still not prevailed against Jacob, the man, he goes and sort of twists on Jacob and wrenches his hip and strains it at the socket, which caused Jacob to henceforth walk with a limp. Okay. At this point, the man says to Jacob, he realizes that, he's been fighting with him for so long, he can't be, he's even tried a dirty underhanded move to try and injure him, to try and escape, and he still can't beat him. So the man turns to Jacob and he says, Jacob turns to the man and he says, "Let me go, for the dawn is breaking." And Jacob answers the man with saying, "I will not let you go unless you bless me." So then the man asks Jacob, he says, well, what is your name? Jacob obviously replies, well, my name is Jacob. The man blesses him by saying, your name shall no longer be Jacob, but your name shall be Israel, for you have striven with beings divine and human and prevailed. Then Jacob then asks the man, after receiving his blessing, he asks the man what his name is, and the man answers only with saying, you must not ask my name, and then he leaves, and he's gone. Now, there's been a lot of speculation all throughout history as to what was the exact identity of this man who Jacob wrestled. Okay. Dan, do you have any thoughts on that? You know, who do you think it was? Who or what do you think it was that Jacob wrestled against until dawn? And no man could really top the other one, but whoever Jacob was wrestling had to wrench his hip just to get away. Anybody have any thoughts on who they think that individual might have been? There's no real right or wrong answer. You know, it's one of these things that's debate to this day. Tracy says, the one I hear most often is the angel Raphael. That's the predominant theory I hear. I have heard that theory as well. You know, many have speculated about the exact identity of this individual who Jacob is wrestling. You know, some people contend that, you know, kind of similar to what Tracy says, that, you know, it was an angel, you know, or some divine being of God's court. I've also heard other contending viewpoints that have said that the person who Jacob wrestled was actually God himself. And the reason that they use to try to support this argument is that, you know, we all know that, you know, there are the 72 names of God, okay? But the ultimate true name of God, which in Hebrew is symbolized with the letters Yod He Vod He, you know, we know that to be unpronounceable. You know, it's the unpronounceable name of God. We don't try to pronounce it, you know, number one, for fear that if we get it wrong, we'll blaspheme the name. And then number two, it's also, there is this idea that with it being of God and part of God and God's name, that if there's the idea that, you know, imperfect, mortal flesh, if we say the name and pronounce the name, if you say it, you will die. You know, it's kind of like how God says, you know, no man can stand before me and live, you know. It goes along the same way with the name. Now, when Jacob asked whoever it was that he was wrestling, you know, what is your name? And the only answer he gets is, you must not ask my name. That's where that theory, you know, gets a little bit of steam and a little bit of credibility, where people will say that, well, maybe it was God himself that he wrestled with. The cool thing is that, you know, it's one of those things we could just debate for eternity. No one's going to really know. Nobody will ever really know until you're standing before God, and I guess we can ask him ourselves. Tracy says, kind of like this, if we were to look upon Hashem's true face, we would die or go insane at best. That's right, Tracy. Same thing with the name. It's just the name. It's unpronounceable, and it's just probably so overwhelming to the finite, human, imperfect mind that it probably, like, literally blow your mind, and then your body couldn't keep going after that, because your brain will probably be turned to toast at that point. Let's be honest. Now, the rabbis in the Midrash, you know, the rabbinic commentary that accompanies the Torah, the rabbis identify this man. You know, this is their take on who is the man who was possibly the man who Jacob wrestled. They identify that this man was possibly... Now you're getting memories of Raiders of the Lost Ark. That was a cool movie, so just rock on and go with that. That was a cool movie. Okay, but the rabbis in the Midrash, the rabbinic commentary that accompanies the Torah, they have their views on who possibly it was that was this individual who Jacob was wrestling with, and it kind of goes along with the idea of, like Tracy, what you had said, about that it was an angel. The rabbis identify the man as a guardian angel or a patron angel, possibly of Esau or of the house of Esau. And when this patron angel, saw Jacob on his way to come find and see Esau, his instant fear was that Jacob is coming again to take from Esau. He is coming again to take from Esau what rightfully is not his. And so the angel went out and basically picked a fight with Jacob. He goes out and he picks a fight with Jacob, trying to stop him from ever making it to Esau, because, like I said, that the angel was afraid that he was going to steal again from Esau. Upon wrestling with Jacob until dawn and discovering that he couldn't defeat Jacob, this patron angel, if you will, he wrenches Jacob's hip in a kind of low blow to escape sort of move. It's basically the biblical version of a low blow, kick to the crotch. Something that would drop a man long enough so that he can escape. However, in this situation, Jacob's might only wounds him slightly and, doesn't defeat him. Tracy says, I've also seen it being said that it could be a metaphor for the Jewish people ourselves. After all, Jacob is renamed Israel, and Jewish means one who wrestles with God. So, yep, Tracy, you're actually a step ahead of me here. That's exactly what I was leading to. That's awesome. But so the angel, low blow, tries to think, I can get away. Well, now the angel realizes that he was once the aggressor. He's clearly defeated and on the defense. At which point, Jacob commands to be let go. He says, the dawn is breaking, let me go. And Jacob's like, well, I'll only let you go if you give me a blessing. Now, the rabbis also say that this is symbolic of, once again, Jacob, in a way, defeating Esau again. But he says, I'll only let you go if you give me a blessing. So the angel asks him, says, what is your name? And like what Tracy just said, tells his name is Jacob. He's like, now on you shall no longer be known as Israel. You shall no longer be known as Jacob. You shall be known as Israel, because you have wrestled with divine beings and humans and prevailed. The rabbis also tend to view this blessing in a way as sort of a de facto non-aggression pact between Jacob and Esau henceforth forward, because Jacob, he's still Jacob in the flesh and everything, but now biblically and in God's eyes he's known as Israel. So it's like, okay, you have no means or reasoning to take from Esau anymore because you're not that person anymore. It's basically, like I said, it works in a way. Rabbis see it as working as a non-aggression pact in a way. Then the Midrash also has another interpretation that, the story and why they view it as a patron guardian angel of Esau is it can be also, from that interpretation, it can be taken to be seen as a warning to all future enemies of the Jewish people. essentially saying, to any future enemies that we have had or would have, God forbid we don't have anymore. But it basically says, your patron angel could not withstand him being Jacob or Israel. And you seek to attack, and yet you still seek to attack his descendants. It's basically working with the idea is that, the patron angel, the whatever guardian from above protecting this individual tried to take Jacob, tried to take Israel out, and he couldn't do it. So if a godly being, from the heavens couldn't take out Jacob, then who are you trying to take out him or any of his descendants? And his descendants being we. Shalom, Rob. Welcome. So that's that. Now, the story from our portion this week also speaks to us in the lives. It also speaks to us in our lives as Jews, even to this day, and has a lot of meaning for our lives, even several thousand years after it was written. That's right, Rob. Better late than never, and welcome. We're glad you're here. So, like our ancestral father Jacob, we're instructed to question all that we're taught and all that we learn. Just as Jacob wrestled with the divine being, so we are taught to wrestle with the divine message. Okay, we wrestle with it by examining it, by questioning it, by attempting to rationalize it. We're not to take anything at face value. You shouldn't take anything at face value, just simply because, the Torah says it, or, Rabbi so-and-so says so that means it's true, We have to ask questions. We must ask questions. We must analyze everything that we are taught, everything that we learn. And only through these questions can we reach a greater understanding of the Torah and its instructions. By wrestling with what we are taught, we begin to understand the commandments, lessons, and the teachings contained in the Torah, and we understand that they're far more than just simply a list of instructions that we could easily file under the category of because God said so. Tracy says that's the one thing I like about Judaism. We're encouraged to question everything and make up our own minds, and rather than accept things blindly. Rob says thanks for welcome. Help me catch up in the conversation. Hey everybody, Christina Varela, who's just here, that is my wife. So everybody say hello to Mrs. Brian Reitmeyer. Welcome, sweetie. Glad to have you here.
Thank you.
She's literally in the same room as me right now too. Rob, we're discussing this week's Torah portion of the Midrash where Jacob wrestles with an angel, and it gets a whole lot more intense from here too. Okay, so like I said, we can start to understand, by questioning everything. We come to see the deeper meaning in everything, and it's not just we have to do this because God said so. We come to understand the deeper and intrinsic values and the teachings and the wisdom behind them, and then learn how to apply them in our lives. And from there, we can begin to see how much our lives are improved by them. And then what simply becomes a because God said so sort of thing becomes a true understanding and the wisdom of our Almighty Creator and the wisdom of the Torah which He has given to us. Ron, this week's Torah, it is Vayishlach, which is book of Genesis, chapter 32, verse 4, through chapter 36, verse 43. Okay. Got a lot of notes here. Okay. Now, this whole concept concept that we have in our faith of, we're encouraged to question all things, In some of the ways it's rationalized, so we can more better contribute to the ongoing story of Israel. Okay, this is a very uniquely Jewish thing. It's the encouragement by a religious tradition to question everything, even to question the tenets of the very faith itself that you are a member of. I can remember when I was 18 years old. Seems like a lifetime ago, but when I was 18 years old, I heard a quote that said something to the effect of that even the genius asks questions. And that is so completely true because, you think about it, if we stop asking questions, if we stop wrestling with everything we're taught, then we stop learning and we stop gaining knowledge, and that's a big part of our faith. A huge part of Judaism is that we're always studying, like right now, we're here studying the Vayishlach, and we're probably finding new things about it, and I'm sure that in a year from now when we're here again, when everything resets and we're here studying the same Torah Parsha again, we'll say a lot of the same things and we'll find new things too. That's why you have to just keep studying, always keep studying, keep asking questions, keep challenging what you think you know. So basically, it's the idea that the quest for knowledge is never ending. It always keeps going. Concerning this, how it's encouraged in our faith to ask questions, to question everything, to challenge it, to see if it stands up to the test. I've had many conversations with individuals, who are either former Catholics or former Protestant Christians, and just by my appearance and everything, it's pretty obvious I'm Jewish, so the topic comes up. And so, we end up talking about, religion and such. And whenever I always mention the fact that in Judaism, in our faith, that us, asking questions, it's not only condoned in our faith, but it's actually encouraged. And to every person who is not Jewish, who I told this to and mentioned it to, each and every one of them was really genuinely surprised, and some of them were even outright shocked. And each and every one of them has then gone on to tell me about how in their faith, yeah, Tracy, it's always someone who grew up a Christian. I find a lot with individuals who were raised in the Catholic Church too. They always will tell me that asking questions is very, very strongly discouraged, and at times even seen as being disrespectful. And they also take it as a sign of, oh, you're asking too many questions. That shows you have a lack of faith. You don't believe. They're taught that everything they read in the Bible, or that everything that is taught to them by their pastor or priest or minister or whatever, that they're to accept it blindly, unquestioningly, okay, without any thought or any investigation. That's why I love our faith so much, is because that's where our faith differs, is that we're encouraged. It's like, hey, speak up. You got a question, ask it, because your question might lead to some more investigation and thought that makes things even clearer. And Tina adds, thank you, that not only that, but that everything from a priest is law. That is true. Tracy says that that's half my family there, questioning anything, especially the church. Oh, it's a huge no. I've known people who have actually been kicked out of the Catholic Church for asking too many questions. I mean, God gave you a brain. God gave us all a brain. Did they want us to think that, He doesn't want us to use it? Yeah, that's right, Tracy. And anyone who questions it is wrong. Even if their question makes complete sense, in their eyes, it's wrong. And non-Catholics can't even question it. Religions like these demand that its followers accept its claims and teachings purely on faith. Now, obviously, our faith in Judaism is faith of. This is going to sound weird when I say it, well, let me rephrase it. It's a religion where works are valued higher over, faith. God, it's not so much what you believe that pleases God, or what you believe about God that pleases Him, but it's how you treat, yourself and your fellow brothers and sisters of the human race. Basically, how you treat God's creation. Tracy says apparently there are rules even apply to those who don't belong to their church, whereas at least with us Jews and mitzvah we follow only apply to Jews and no one else. And Tracy, that's why sometimes it can be a little bit hard to be a Jew, because there's a lot more rules that are expected and we're held to that no one else is. But it's all part of being the chosen people, and I see that as a beautiful, beautiful thing. Okay. Through our faith, our Lord and Judaism, one is encouraged to, learn and question everything that has been taught to us. Now, this, I feel, and a lot of other rabbis I've heard say the same thing. This leads to a greater understanding and a greater knowledge of God. Then the need for faith, which, what is faith? Faith is belief in something without any factual knowledge. Okay? As we learn about God through, Torah, through understanding of it, through understanding the entirety of the Tanakh, through what the Talmud tells us, our faith diminishes and gets less and less and less, because there's less and less and less need for faith, because it is replaced with knowledge, and the knowledge about our God, the God of Israel. So it wouldn't be unfair to say that our religion kind of dissolves faith and replaces it with knowledge. So, after a little tangent there, back to our Torah story. Still got a lot to cover. Jacob then proceeds on his journey to his brother Esau, who rides ahead, comes out to meet Jacob upon receiving the word of his intending arrival. And the brothers meet and reconcile, and eventually Esau accepts all of Jacob's gifts after some urging from Jacob, and essentially, they're cool with each other again. They bury the hatchet. And, like I said, Esau accepts all of Jacob's gifts. And this is seen as symbolic, there we go, of God's blessing upon Jacob, for through God's blessing, Jacob, who's the chosen brother, even though he wasn't the rightful brother, that blessing should have gone to Esau. It allows God's chosen brother to at last show kindness, and in a sort of symbolic measure, sort of repay a sort of debt to the rightful yet unchosen brother. Then the meeting between the brothers, goes well. They're reconciled. They're genuinely happy to see each other. Jacob says to Esau, he even tells him that seeing his face is like seeing the face of God, because he was so worried and everything. So, anyways, Jacob is supposed to follow Esau and continue with him into the land of Seir, but instead he decides to continue on to the city of Shechem in the land of Canaan instead. Maybe he was still uneasy being around his brother, thinking that, they just reconciled, thinking that, maybe some old grudges were there. But who knows? But he decides to not go on the Seir, and he decides to instead push on, first stopping at Sukkot, and then eventually he makes it to the city of Shechem, which is in Canaan. Now, this is an interesting plot twist to what we have here, and it leads us to the second major idea and teaching that I think runs through our Parsha this week is, Jacob having just avoided one possible conflict that could have had, really negative ramifications upon his house. He soon finds his house potentially involved in another one. It's like, from one calamity, he dodges this one, dodges the bullet, and then, boom, right into another one. It's like, well, at this point, the guy doesn't seem to be able to catch a break. Now, they were in the city of Shechem, in Canaan, and Jacob's daughter, Dinah, was out visiting with the other women in the city when a Canaanite priest, I'm sorry, I misread my own handwriting here. Canaanite prince, there we go, named Shechem, who obviously the city was named after. He was the son of Hamor, who was a Hivite king. Okay, he saw Jacob's daughter Dinah and he instantly fell in love with her, and he became infatuated with her, and he desired to take her for his wife. Now, the Torah doesn't really tell us too much of how Dinah felt about this, but the Torah does tell us that Shechem took Dinah and that he laid with her by force. Translation, he raped her. Which, that is a huge, dishonorable, terrible act that was seen to be done to a Hebrew woman. Basically, you don't lay with a Hebrew woman by force. You don't rape a Hebrew woman. I'd like to add that, that's something you just don't do to any woman because it's just, back then they used rape as a weapon, as a way of gaining control over someone, basically saying, I exert authority over you because, I did this to you and I can continue to do this to you. It was seen as just a reprehensible and dishonorable act done to a Hebrew woman. And let's be honest, it is a terrible act that should never be done to any woman, in my opinion. And honestly, if you ask me, any man who would do that to a woman is befitting of a punishment so terrible that I don't feel it's fit to discuss within the context of a synagogue environment where we're at right now. So we'll just leave that at that. So, Jacob's sons, who were Dinah's brothers, were obviously outraged by this. Now, obviously, Jacob was upset. He was peeved too, but, again, he didn't want to make any waves or make any enemies among the Canaanite community, as again, he was vastly outnumbered and was looking to protect the prosperity and longevity of his household. So when King Hamor, who was the Hivite king, when he comes to Jacob, Hamor was Shechem's father. When he comes to Jacob and asking Jacob to give his daughter Dinah, in marriage to Shechem, basically saying, hey, would you give your daughter to me so that I can force her to marry his rapist? Jacob agrees to this, because like I said, he doesn't want to make waves, doesn't want to start wars that he can't fight, he can't possibly win. But he agrees to it under the condition that all the males in the city of Shechem be circumcised so that they can be like the Hebrews and of the covenant with Hashem. So Hamor agrees with this and tells his people that by doing this, they'll be able to intermarry with the Israelite Hebrew women and still gain riches through their marriages, their intermarriages with each other, with the descendants of Jacob. Because as Hamor sees it, they'll inherit all the prosperity and all the wealth and all the blessings that Jacob possessed. Basically, he's looking at it as get rich quick scheme. Like, hey, we can make a lot of money on this. We can prosper through them. Everything that they have, they'll come and live among us and take wives among us, and we'll take wives from them, and the land can hold us all, and everything that they have will be ours, and we'll prosper and we'll get rich off of their backs. Now, meanwhile, Jacob's sons are still fuming about the fact that their sister got raped by Shechem. They're still enraged by this, so his sons Simeon and Levi, they devised a plan. They waited until the third day after all of the men in the city of Shechem had been circumcised. Okay, and you gotta remember, this is back in the days when there's no anesthetic, and yeah, it's a surgical procedure. No anesthetic, and you're gonna be in pain for a good while after that, and this was long before the days where you could pop a Vicodin and sleep it off after your surgeries. So they just had to suck it up and deal with it. So these guys were literally down in pain from their incision wounds and their circumcision. So, like I said, they waited until the third day after all the males of the city had been circumcised, and were still in great pain from it. And they went into the city, and the Torah tells us that they entered the city. Simeon and Levi entered into the city totally unmolested. They just waltzed right in, and they put every male in the city of Shechem with the sword. Basically, they butchered them. They ran the sword through everyone. They killed every single male, including King Hamor and his son Shechem, and then got Dinah, took her from Shechem's house, took her back to Jacob, and then after this massacre happened, Simeon and Levi's other brothers went into the city and pretty much looted and pillaged it. They took all the women and the children, and they took them as captives, took them into slavery. All the wealth that was in the people's homes, they looted and pillaged that and took it as booty. Basically, kind of like the spoils of war. They took all their flocks and everything. They basically looted the place. Now, obviously, Jacob was upset about this because, like I said, he didn't want to make waves, and he knew that if word got out of this, that all the Canaanite communities around could possibly gang up against him, and that'd be it. His house was still relatively small, couldn't fend off forces like that. And he brought this grievance to his sons, Simeon and Levi, and they gave the reply, which I think speaks volumes about, the idea of family unity and, siblings sticking together. Especially, big brother looking out for little sister. They simply replied, "Should our sister be treated like a whore?" And now you know what big brothers do when protecting their younger siblings, especially protecting little sister. This story, again, touches on a concept where Judaism has a quite different stance and opinion from other faiths. And most notably, I'm going to reference Christianity again, because I see the two faiths are, because Christianity came forth from Judaism, they're kind of eternally linked, even though we have a lot of different, two faiths have a lot of different viewpoints and thought processes on everything. They're still linked because, Judaism is the wellspring that Christianity came forth from. And the concept here that is brought up in the second part of our Torah portion is the concept, of self-defense. Okay, our faith in Judaism, and faith which came from it, was Christianity. From coming from the same well, they have very, very differing viewpoints and opinions on the concept of self-defense. In Christianity, one is taught, to turn the other cheek, not fight back, not defend yourself. Basically, to place oneself in a position of subjugation to one's aggressor. You're taught to pray for your enemies, to bless those who curse you, to do good to those who would do evil to you, the whole love your enemy. Okay? Now, this is all done, and the reason they do this is because in their eschatology and their thought process and their mind frame, they're working towards a reward in a bigger life, like in some next life or some afterlife or anything. Where this basically lies in where our religion, Judaism, it's very, very different. In our faith, we know that this life is the only life, the only existence that we can be completely 100% certain of, because we're all here right now. So I know I'm here. Jeremy knows he's here. Tracy knows he's here. Tina knows she is here. Guest number 312 knows he's here. Rob knows he's here. We're all aware of this life where we're at right now. And we're all completely certain of it. Right, where am I at? Okay, sorry about that. We're all totally certain of this life. And the concept of an afterlife, which Christianity seems to go on so heavily about, like this life is a preparation for the afterlife. In our faith, with this being the only life we can be certain of, we have to cherish this life. Really, there's not a whole lot of concrete speak in our faith dedicated to the idea and the concept of any afterlife. It's not really mentioned anywhere in the Torah, and I know that it speaks of Sheol as being the abode of the dead, but there isn't a whole lot of the detail and description of afterlife, as to what it would be. I know that in the Talmud, the rabbis tend to speak a lot of Olam Haba, the world to come, but even sometimes that can be a little bit sketchy at times in their description. Basically, in our faith, we always remember, and one of our core values that we hold is that this life is precious, and this life is a gift, and it should be something that should be cherished and treasured and enjoyed and protected at all times. This passage of our weekly Parsha hints at the idea of defending oneself and defending one's family. And, the rabbis tell us that this life is to be defended with as much force necessary to defend it. Tracy says, well, short of someone coming back from the dead and telling us we really have no way of knowing, and even the patriarchs and prophets knew that. It's like I used to joke, well, who knows? The Buddhists can be right, so we can all come back as cows, so we'll waste our lives worrying about what's going to happen after death. Right on, Tracy, right on. I don't really want to come back as a cow because I live out in the country and they don't smell too good, but definitely right on with that. So we have, we're talking about the idea of, self-defense, defending your life. The rabbis of Midrash tell us that, even if it means to save your own life or the life of another human being, that even if it means you have to take the life of your aggressor, one is not only permitted to do so, but you are commanded to do so. That's the whole, how much our lives we are to value our life. It's basically the idea that, we're all in our homes right now for wherever we're at. God, yeah, sort of, yeah, Tina, like kill or be killed thing. Kind of like that. But it's the idea that, it's like, God forbid this happens to, I was about to say saving another life is like the greatest mitzvah. We're even allowed to violate the Shabbat to do it. That's right, Tracy, because there is a tractate from the Talmud that says that a person who saves even one life, it is as if he has saved the entire world. Because, think about it, we all of us who are here now, we all essentially came from one person, from one life. And that was Adam. At a certain point, the whole entire population of the world was one. And that was Adam. So, you save one person, it's as if you'd save the whole world. Now, however, the rabbis also say there are situations, and this ties in with what we're talking about tonight, where it is permissible to take a life. And let me explain it this way. So we're all in our homes, wherever we're coming from tonight. God forbid this happens to any one of us. But say someone barges into our home, forces their way in, and breaks in, and is holding us hostage with the intent to do major harm. Someone breaks into your house, holding you hostage. That person is going to kill you. It's like what Tina said, kill or be killed. In that situation, you have the right to use lethal force to defend your life. Rob, this applies not so much to Jacob, but it applies to the actions of his sons, Simeon and Levi, in their defense of another human being. It ties in with the idea that you have the right to defend yourself, to defend your family, another human being. One could also argue, well, before I get to that, I'm going to finish my other point, is that basically what the rabbis say. Oh, you don't sound rude at all, Rob. Don't even worry about it. But to finish my previous thought before I move on to the next one, so then we can begin to wrap this up, is that the rabbis tell us is that, to defend your own life and preserve your life, it is permissible to do so if it means taking the life of your attacker. Basically, the self-defense, kill or be killed. You don't want to die, but this other person who's attacking you wants you to die. You have to protect and defend your own life. So you are permitted, and in some ways it can be interpreted that you are commanded to take that person's life so he doesn't take your life and possibly the lives of everyone else who's there with you. Now, there is the argument made that Simeon and Levi's actions could be argued as overreacting and overreaching, seeing as how they could have just went after Shechem and murdered him, rather than murdering everyone in the town. But then it could also be argued that the men of the city wished to prosper from the crime of Dinah being raped, as it was going to result in them being able to take Hebrew women for wives, and they prosper as a result of it. And there's a teaching in the Talmud that kind of backs this up that says that if a crime is committed in a city and it is known, yet no one does anything to stop it, the entire city shares in the guilt of that crime and faces punishment for it. And this is really a perfect example of it right here with Simeon and Levi massacre is that, a crime was committed, and not only was it known to the city, but the city sought to make financial gain for it. Therefore, the brutal punishment of the entire city was permissible. So we asked the question, were Simeon and Levi's actions justified? In this biblical incident, we could argue that, yeah, they were. So, working towards drawing this to a close at this point, there's a big hullabaloo from all this going around. God tells Jacob to arise and return to Bethel, to the land that was promised to him, where God is then going to appear to Jacob again. And God causes a stir and a panic and a fright to come over all the people to the nations that Jacob will pass through on his way out. So it's basically like a shield. No one can attack him. It ties back into the point that I made earlier about how we as Jews need God, because He's our shield, He's our protector. So Jacob then returns to Bethel, and at this point God appears to Jacob again, speaks to him, instructs him that he and his family are to be fertile and increase, and that an assembly of nations shall come from him, and that the land that God assigned to Isaac and Abraham, He will also assign to Israel and his offspring to come. Then Jacob then sets up a pillar, blesses it, anoints it, marks the spot where God had spoken to him, and then he and his family set out from Bethel towards Ephron. However, shortly after that, Jacob's beloved wife Rachel, she was pregnant, she goes into hard labor, and she dies as a result of it. And with her dying breath, Torah tells us that she named her son Ben-Oni, which in Hebrew literally means son of my suffering. Now, however, Jacob always called this son Benjamin. I guess, maybe that was more comforting to him rather than, referring to his son as son of my suffering, because it will remind him every time he does of the death of his beloved wife. I don't know. So basically, at this point, Israel returns home to his father Isaac's ancestral house, where Isaac's now 180 years old, and he's pretty much on his deathbed. Isaac then passes away and is buried by both of his sons, who are now no longer estranged, they're reconciled. Esau and Jacob bury Isaac. I always find it very interesting to note that you can remember after the flood, it says something about God saying that man should only live for 120 years, yet Isaac somehow managed to live 180, and I think that's kind of a cool thing. I guess maybe that shows that if you're a loyal, humble servant of God, maybe God will give you a few extra years more than what you've been granted. Okay, and finally, our Parsha this week closes with a listing of the line of Esau, which became the clans of Edom. I think it's interesting to note, a final note here, that the Edomites, the descendants of Esau, the lines that came through him and his many wives, they were the first who began choosing, they were the first, like Hebrews in a way, that began choosing a king to lead over them. And they did this long before Israel ever did. And actually, come to think about it, we haven't, at this point, we haven't made it to Sinai yet. So technically, one could argue that the nation of Israel, per se, doesn't even exist yet. So I always find it interesting that, the Edomites began doing that way before we began doing that. Alright, well, before I throw this out for any questions for anybody, I would like, now's the time where, you gotta ask for a donation. So basically, we asked if anyone, has attended this class, they send us a donation here at OneShul for $5. That's pretty much the going rate of what we do for a class. $5 is like, just maybe skipping a Starbucks coffee, or I'm a major soda junkie, so I drink about 2 or 3 of these a day. $5 is maybe me drinking 2 or 3 less of those a day. It's all good, pretty easy. So if you like what you got here and you want to continue to keep coming to us, please, just please send us in a donation. And also, we really appreciate it too, if you want to volunteer your time here too, contact us here. You can do that as well. It's awesome to have more people here. And the more the merrier, really. One less fast food meal. Lose weight that way. That's awesome, Tracy. Thank you. That's a great way. I had fast food earlier today, and it made me feel very sick for a while. And I was thinking, oh man, not now. I have to teach later. But thankfully, I got over that. I have a suspicion that I think it may have been God sort of getting even with me because I took a bite into this hamburger and did not realize that there was bacon on it until I tasted the bacon in my mouth. So that was a big whoops. So I just pray that I'm forgiven for that. I also like to let everybody know that we have here at OneShul we have Shabbat services and holiday services. And Tracy, who's here with us today, she's up next this coming Friday night. She's going to be leading us in Shabbat service. And I encourage every one of you here to come and check it out. Tracy does a really, really wonderful job with the Shabbat services. They're really deep. They're really spiritual. And I enjoy them very much. And I think everyone here will too. So everybody, please, November 30th, Friday night, be here and be here for Tracy's service. And I guarantee you will not be disappointed. It's very beautiful. And with that, let me open up the floor here. Does anybody have anything thank you, Tracy, 7 p.m. Eastern Time. So it's 4 o'clock here in California. So does anybody have anything else they maybe are wondering about, want to ask, whether pertaining to this week's Torah portion or just all things Jewish? Tracy, I think the charades could make it more amusing, a lot more colorful. You should think about it. Anybody else have anything they'd like to ask or add? Anything about our Torah portion this week? I bet he will. That'll be awesome. What's the first thing that comes to mind, Rob, that you'd want to ask? Just you got to remember, there's no such thing as a bad question. There are no silly questions. There are no stupid questions. They're all good questions. While I'm waiting to see if Rob or anyone else has any questions, I'd like to encourage everyone here to be in touch with me if you like. I will hang around in the chat room for about 10 or 15 minutes or longer if anybody still wants me to hang around or needs to talk to me about anything. And then I'm the first name in the chat room. That is my Facebook. If anybody hasn't added me yet, feel free to add me. I have links on there to my email, my messenger, and my Skype. You can be in touch with me any way you like. I would love to hear from you guys. That's right, Tracy. We're all beginners who knew nothing at some point, Rob, so just ask away. There's certain blessing prayer that coincides with this week's Parsha. I'm honestly not sure. That's a very good question. It's possible there might be. I usually, if you were here from the beginning, before we start, I usually just say a prayer for, a blessing for studying Torah. Tracy, you're a lifesaver. Thank you. Tracy's going to look it up for you, Rob. Anybody else have anything else? Because I am going to draw this to a close. yourself tonight. Alright, everybody. Well, then, with that, I will bring this to a close, wrap this all up. I would like to say that as always, it's been a pleasure being here with you tonight. Talking Torah with you, teaching Torah with you. I'll be here every Monday night for the conceivable future at 8 o'clock Eastern, 5 o'clock Pacific. So I hope to see you guys all here again. I'm sorry if anyone's in the chat room. And with that, I will say good night to you all. I will be in the chat room again. I'm just going to close this down. Ahava and shalom to everybody. Peace and love.